Good evening and welcome to the November 14th meeting of the Indian River County Planning and Zoning Commission. We'll call the meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance. Thank you. Any additions or deletions?
No, sir.
You sure?
Unfortunately,
Okay. Our first order of business is the approval of the minutes for the October 24th, 2024 meeting.
Motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good enough. We've got a full agenda tonight. We've got 6 public hearings. And so we will begin with the first one. This is Emerson Oaks PD. It's a request for modified conceptual plan development and PD rezoning approval and concurrent preliminary PD plat and plan approval for 171 lot, single-family resident development. Pulte Home Company LLC is the applicant. BGE Incorporated is the agent. The zoning is A1 agricultural up to 1 unit per 5 acres. Land use designation is 4 acres of AG1, agricultural 1 up to 1 unit per 5 acres. 78.9 acres of the L1 low density residential 1 up to 3 units per acre. The proposed density is 2.38 units per acre. Any declaration of ex parte communication on this one? Nope. We'll swear in any participants that would like to speak on this first public hearing, please.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Staff presentation.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick order of business. To my right here at center stage is Chris Balter, formerly Chief of Long Range Planning, now the Planning and Development Services Director. I will be presenting this item on behalf of Patrick Murphy and hanging around for a little bit, but then I'll be taking off and Chris will take over running the meeting just for order of business. For the record, I am Ryan Sweeney, Assistant Planning and Development Services Director. Tonight we have a request for a modified special exception and conceptual PD plan and concurrent preliminary PD plan plat approval for the Emerson Oaks plan development. A brief slide on the plan development process. The first step is the conceptual PD plan, which involves a Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation at a public hearing, which is being held tonight, and a second public hearing with ultimate denial or approval at the Board of County Commissioner level. The second step in the process is preliminary PD plan plat approval, which is strictly P&Z approval, which they are also requesting tonight concurrently, again, subject to approval of the modified conceptual plan. The third step is the land development permit or waiver reviewed and approved at the staff level. And then the final step is the final PD plan plat, which is back at the board approval, typically a consent item. The project site is located west of 43rd Avenue between 13th Street Southwest and 17th Street Southwest. And from this point forward, all slides north will be pointing to the right. So we have 13th Street on the right, 43rd at the bottom, and 17th Street at the left. This is an aerial depicting the existing conditions of the site with the project site overlaid on the aerial. Excuse me. So for background, on November 15th, 2022, the BCC previously approved a very similar project under the name Red Tree Cove PD. More recently, a different applicant / developer is requesting a slightly modified PD approval under the current project name of Emerson Oaks PD. Due to the nature of the requested changes, which does include one modified or additional waiver as well as one additional public benefit, the modified PD project is required to go back through the same approval process as the original project. So the modified development summary. The new project site, 76.73 net acres after right-of-way, is slightly smaller now due to an increased amount of right-of-way that's being dedicated. We'll touch on that in a minute. The 171 single-family units is actually a reduction of 4 units, again, due to a new right-of-way alignment that they are accommodating through their public benefit. The density is 2.38 units per acre, which is almost exactly the same as it was before. There is a reduction in the overall project open space from 69.7% to 60.73%, still well over and above the required open space. And that's entirely due to the increase in building coverage on the individual lots. So the common area open spaces, tracks, buffers, those all remain the same. It's purely a function of larger buildings on the individual lots. And the phasing is slightly different. They now have 3 phases. Phase 1A, which is a small sort of subphase with 7 model units on their model row and the entry in a small stormwater area. And then phase 1B, which was originally phase 1, is roughly the north half of the project with 70 lots. And phase 2, which is the south half with 94 units. And also, as part of this modified request, they are seeking, again, to increase the maximum building coverage on the individual lots from 35% to 50%. It's a different developer home builder that has a different building product and different footprint. In order to offset that additional request, the applicant has agreed to dedicate additional right-of-way in order to accommodate a new alignment of 13th Street Southwest. After Red Tree Cove was approved, a different project, Indria Point, which was formerly Turtle Cove, is being resurrected on the east side of 43rd. And it was discovered at the time that the 13th Street alignment on that side of the road is actually further south. And so in order for that intersection to eventually line up and be a T intersection, this project is going to accommodate that shift. All other waivers, public benefits, required improvements, offsite improvements, buffers, and project layout does remain the same. For the record, we did do a full, complete staff report with basically resetting all the parameters. However, for PowerPoint presentation, I just hit the highlights. I do want to show just what the previous conceptual PD plan looked like, and really the only modification is down here in the bottom right corner, which is actually the northeast corner. Again, is this right-of-way alignment, and again, they did lose 4 lots due to that alignment. I, for the record, want to run through dedications, improvements, and conditions, which include right-of-way dedications, and this is all outlined in the staff report, but right-of-way dedications for 13th Street Southwest, 17th Street Southwest, and 43rd Avenue, the off-site traffic improvements, which are all the same, external sidewalks, internal sidewalks, street lighting, common green space / recreation area, and the South County Initiative item, which is the contribution to the bridge, future bridge on 43rd. Public benefits, again, all remains the same with the additional right-of-way for 13th Street Southwest, right-of-way dedications, 17th Street paving, 13th Street eastbound right turn lane, upsized utility lines, which again is covered in more detail in the report, and the contribution to the 17th Street Bridge Southwest crossing. And staff's recommendation is that the Planning and Zoning Commission grant preliminary PD plan and plat approval, subject to the BCC approval of the modified conceptual PD plan and special exception request, and to recommend that the BCC grant modified conceptual PD plan and special exception approval for Emerson Oaks PD with conditions listed in staff's report. Again, touching on right-of-way dedications, the contribution to the future 17th Street Bridge, off-site traffic improvements and paving, final landscape and buffer plans, and street lighting and sidewalk plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Any commissioner questions of the staff to the right here? Okay, go ahead.
Couple. Ryan, could you put up the public benefit slide you just had up there, or the staff recommendation?
Sure.
Under road dedications and contribution to future 17th Street Bridge crossing,
Yes.
can you give us just a little bit more information, like how much? Or
Sure.
the length of the, the frontage, that
Sure.
kind of thing?
Sure, Mr. Chair and Beth. The right-of-way dedications are all spelled out in the staff report in section 11 on page 3. For 13th Street Southwest, it's an additional 30 feet of right-of-way for the western 272 feet, as well as the nearly, almost an acre, 0.94 acres here at the corner. So it's a pretty sizable dedication. For 17th Street Southwest, it's 100 feet of right-of-way along the project's entire frontage. And for 43rd Avenue, it's 50 additional feet. So it is quite a lot, well over and above the required.
It's very substantial. I'm sorry I missed that. in
No,
my
that's okay.
review.
And then as far as the bridge contribution, we intentionally left it somewhat, I don't want to say open-ended, but we do have, there is a percentage, and I think we discussed this 2 years ago. Historically, there's two ways of sort of seeking out a contribution: setting a set dollar amount or agreeing to a percentage of what the future cost will be. And we've been burned on a number of times where we set the dollar amount and then 5, 10, 20 years later, that dollar amount diminishes. So we do have a percentage that's been agreed upon. However, the actual cost of the bridge won't be calculated until that payment is due.
Good. Any on the left?
Not yet.
No. Yep.
I just have one note. Susan Pardo, Deputy County Attorney. On here, it talks about under subparagraph 3C, dedication of the conservation easement in favor of the county. That should be done prior to review of the final plat process. Just a reminder to the applicants that that should be done through a separate conservation easement with an actual agreement to maintain that with the planning staff, the environmental planner. So that would need to be done either at the time that the plat is recorded or prior to and recorded and it referenced on the plat.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and ask just in case. The access off of 17th Street Southwest, and I don't know what it was before, that seems awfully close to 43rd Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Landers. That has not changed.
Okay.
It's actually, it's considerably further than you would think. It meets the intersection spacing. It's just,
Sufficient distance away from the intersection.
correct, it's the scale of the plan that is a little bit misleading.
Okay.
Good on the left? All right, this is a public hearing, so I'll open the floor to public comment. Please use either one of the microphones. State your name and address, please, for the record.
Good evening, Jim Vitter with BGE, Engineer of Record, 601 21st Street, Vero Beach, 32960. We're here with the property owner, developer, traffic engineer to answer any additional questions that might come up. We agree with the staff report. It's been a long time getting here, but finally happy to see this coming to a conclusion. So happy to answer any questions or comments that might come up.
Any questions? No? Anyone else?
Yeah, actually I do.
right.
Sorry, as they come to me. The part of the agreement is the change in the lot sizes, and then with the 50-foot wide lot, and I mean, I'm looking at a 40-foot envelope, which is, it is what it is, but I mean, are we really looking at 10 foot between the two?
I'm missing a section. Where's the table?
The proposed standards, PD standards, the 65-foot wide lot, the 50-foot lot, and then the side setbacks are only 5 feet on the 50-foot wide.
That, yes, Mr. Chair, Mr. Landers, that is correct. For the 50-foot wide lots, it would be a 5-foot side, which would be 10 feet in between. So, but that's roughly half of the total lots. And then the other half is 15.
Still just 10 feet between two houses. I mean, that's,
That is correct.
Anything else, Chip? Anyone else from the public like to speak on this? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Any additional questions? Or I'll call for a motion.
A motion to approve per staff's recommendations.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good enough. Public hearing number 2 is Hunters Grove PD, and this is a request for a conceptual plan development, PD plan, and PD rezoning approval, and concurrent preliminary PD plan or plat approved for a 170-unit multifamily residential development. Randolph Construction Group Incorporated is the applicant, MBV Engineering is the agent. The zoning is RS6, residential single family up to 6 units per acre. Land use designation is M2, medium density residential 2, up to 10 units per acre. Proposed density is 9.04 units per acre. Any declarations of ex parte communication? None. Anyone who would like to speak on this, please stand and be sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Good enough. Staff presentation.
All right, good evening, Chair, members of the board. Before you tonight is the Hunters Grove Plan Development PD rezoning, conceptual PD plan, and preliminary PD plat that will be running concurrently with one another. So just to give you an overview of the PD rezoning process, so we are here tonight at the PZC recommendation stage. This whole entire package will be bundled up and sent to the BCC for their approval or denial or alternation of conditions. It's their choice. Technically speaking, the preliminary PD plan would then come back to the Plan and Zoning Board. However, since it's running as a concurrent package, everything will be given to the BCC and they will give their final recommendation on the rezoning, the conceptual PD plan, and preliminary PD plan. So once PZC makes their recommendation, if it's an approval, it will go to the land development permit stage, or they can seek a waiver through Public Works staff. However, since this is a big project, a waiver is very unlikely. And then finally, they would do the final PD plan and plat, which would be submitted to staff for staff level review. And then once it passes staff level review, it will be put on the consent agenda for the BCC for their for their approval or denial. So just to give you an idea of kind of where this site is, it's north of 41st Street and east of 43rd Avenue. Dodgertown Elementary is to the north. You have the Grace Grove subdivision to the east. You have the IRC Emergency Operations Center and Public Works Utilities Center to the west, and then you also have the Sheriff's Department to the south of the property. This is just to give you an idea of how the project will be overlaid with the current conditions that are on the site. It's mostly a vegetated site with some abandoned buildings on site. The proposed development will be approximately 17.80 acres in size. It will provide for a total of 161 total multifamily units, and the overall density will be 9.04 units to the acre. It is commensurate with its future land use of M2, which allows up to 10 units to the acre. They are also only requesting one PD waiver, and this is for stormwater maintenance purposes. So again, this is to give you an idea of how the site will be overlaid. There will be multifamily townhome buildings. Most of them will be 2 units each. They'll be on the periphery of the development, then also in the middle of the development, as you see. There's also going to be a clubhouse and a pool to the southeastern portion of the site as well. So again, they're just requesting one PD waiver for stormwater maintenance. This has been fully reviewed, vetted, and approved by Public Works Engineering, who handles all the drainage for the county. Traffic circulation plan calls for one standard ring road that goes around the interior of the development. There will be one emergency access driveway on 43rd Avenue, which is a requirement as it's over 100 units. And there will also be one full access connection to 41st Street. Again, there'll just be one standard wet stormwater pond that will be directly centered to the middle of the site. For the landscape buffers, we will have a 30-foot type B southern landscape buffer. It's going to be on the southwestern portion of the site. This is required to be 30 feet because the abutting land use across the southern portion of 41st Street is commercial industrial, and that is a requirement of the PD buffer section. On the other portion of the southern site, which is southeast of the site, they can have a 20-foot thoroughfare plan road buffer because the future land use is public, which does not require any special type of buffers for PDs. They will also be providing the 20-foot thoroughfare plan road buffer on their western property boundary as well. And then the applicants will be providing a 15-foot type C buffer on both the north and east portions of the site. This is actually above and beyond what the PD section requires as it abuts residential zoning, where technically no buffer is actually required. The required improvements will be one internal sidewalk and pedestrian system, street lighting, and green space and recreation areas. Typically, for a project of this size, sidewalks would also be required on the periphery of the site. However, there are sidewalks located on 41st Street and 43rd Avenue. So since those are already there, the applicant does not need to provide those. Public benefits for this project are a dedication of 20 feet of right-of-way along the north side of 41st Street, dedication of 15 feet of right-of-way along the eastern side of 43rd Avenue. There's going to be a bus stop with shelter on the north side of 41st Street. This was coordinated with the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and the final location will be determined via land development permit. There will be a sidewalk extension along the north side of 41st Street. So they're going to basically extend the sidewalk where it ends at the Grace Grove subdivision. It's going to go east for approximately 1,525 linear feet, and it will stop approximately at the intersection of 32nd Avenue and 41st Street. So that will provide a much-needed sidewalk space, and then as we get more projects in, the goal would be to extend the sidewalk along 41st Street all the way to US 1. And then again, as I said, they're going to have an increased 15-foot Type-C landscape buffer along the north and east property lines. So staff recommends that the PZC grant preliminary PD plat approval along with the rezoning. This will be subject to BCC approval. We recommend this with the conditions listed in the staff report. These conditions generally relate to dedication of right-of-way, obtaining the MPO's approval for final bus stop and shelter locations, obtaining staff approval for all final sidewalk locations and designs along 41st Street, final landscape, street lighting, and tree mitigation protection plans, and finally, the construction of all on-site and off-site improvements. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Brandon. Any commissioner questions on the left? Chip?
Regarding the PD approval process, usually there's a lot of give and take, and I see us giving a lot, not getting a lot. I mean, we went from a project that was basically 71 units, RS6 zoning, you get 4 units out of that. I mean, then we went to 10 units per acre, which you get 8, and that's 142 units, and now we're up to 161 units. So, I mean, that's quite a bit of a difference in that respect, and I understand there's allowances that can be made, but I also expect that we should be able to get more out of it, which leads to a question that I have. 2 things. One is the north section of the property versus the school. We have a landscape buffer. Do we have anything else, a fence or whatnot?
No, they don't have a fence on this plan, but they technically don't have to provide the landscape buffer because it is residentially zoned property, so they are going above and beyond county codes to provide the 15-foot landscape buffer.
Except it's a PD. And, I mean, separation between the school from anybody that's in that project walking onto the school grounds, what's there? Is there a fence from the school side on that? Is there? Okay.
Mr. Lenners, again, for the record, Ryan Sweeney, Assistant Planning Development Service Director. I believe there's a fence on Dodgertown property.
We believe there is.
I believe, I can't confirm, but I'm almost positive that there is a fence on the Dodgertown property. Elementary.
Well, that would be something I would be wanting as a potential condition. But the other thing, and the most important thing to me, and I'm not really sure how this can be done or worked out, but the drainage pond in the middle of the community, and there's no barrier between the units and that pond, correct? There's no fencing, there's nothing.
Correct. Again, the fencing requirement typically within residential development is not a requirement based on the slope design of the pond. It's a shallow slope.
Well, and after, unfortunately, the little boy that drowned out west on the apartment project, there's nothing to stop somebody from wandering in there. And that's a major concern that I have nowadays, that we have to fence in common area properties along the roads and everything else. So why can't we see that in a private enterprise that, I mean, and it's minor money. I mean, it really is, but from a security standpoint, and I'm sure it's a lot less money than the liability that may be there for somebody as a developer. So, I mean, those are my major concerns right now.
Got it.
Any questions on the right? No? All right, this is a public hearing, and so I will open the public hearing. There are microphones on both sides. Please state your name and address for anyone that would like to speak.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Aaron Stanton. I'm the engineer of record for the project, representing the client. And I'm here to answer any questions. I just want to thank staff for their great presentation. And if you have any questions for me or the client.
Chip, can he help you with any of the questions you had?
I don't know, can you help me?
I can talk to him. I mean, if that's one of the conditions that you would require, we can definitely.
And
look
we're
at-
not talking a 6-foot tall chain link fence. I mean,
Yeah,
just even a
I
small
think-
4-foot ornamental, I mean, something.
Right.
I mean, that would be, should we, I'm only one vote, but should we get there for a motion, that would be part of my motion as a requirement, because it's just, we don't need to see it again. I mean, I'm sorry.
Right. I think that's, yeah.
Or
I
an
haven't-
elderly person, too.
Sure, sure. I can definitely, we would be amenable to that condition, I think.
You know whether Dodgertown is fenced?
Dodgertown's,
Elementary?
On the north side of your
I
project.
do not know if they have a fence around there. I don't know.
All right, any other questions? Anyone else like to speak? If not, we'll close the public hearing. Any additional questions? None? Call for a motion.
I'll make a motion, we approve staff approval with the condition of a fence of some sort between the pond and the units themselves.
I'll second that.
There's a second. All in favor? Aye.
Gates?
What?
Did you have
Yeah,
gates?
Well, you have to for landscaping,
maintenance.
for landscaping and maintenance, yeah, but I mean, we can only do so much. That's better than nothing.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
The third public hearing tonight is Kennedy Oslo 27th rezoning. Kennedy Oslo 27th LLC's request to rezone approximately 2.9 acres from CL Limited Commercial District to CG General Commercial District. Any declaration of ex parte communication? Nope. Anyone who would like to speak on this, please stand and be sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Thank you. Staff presentation.
Good evening. I'm Cindy Thurman, for the record, Long Range Planning, Senior Planner. This request is for commercial light or commercial limited commercial CL to general commercial. The property contains 2.90 acres, is located at the southwest corner of 9th Street or Oslo Road and 27th Avenue Southwest. This area of the county features a blend of commercial warehousing, residential, and undeveloped commercial land, all lying within this urban service area. This property is currently zoned a limited commercial district. Purposes of this request is to obtain the general commercial zoning district to develop the site with uses allowed in CG, such as drive-through restaurants, construction trade uses, storage and/or warehouse under certain criteria, boat, RV, automotive, and repair services. The surrounding land use pattern consists of a mixture of commercial, residential, and multifamily land uses, particularly along the Oslo Road and 27th Avenue Southwest corridors. Here you can see the zoning map. We're really looking at just this corner here at the southwest intersection. Here's the future land use map that shows in the red the commercial node. This limited commercial district is intended to provide for areas of development of restricted commercial activities to accommodate the convenience of retail and service needs for area residents while minimizing the impact of such activities on any nearby residential areas. In CL, no drive-throughs are permitted with no outside activities or storage. Here's a snapshot of the minimum lot area, minimum lot width, and density of the two zoning classifications side by side. You can see they're almost exactly the same. CG is intended to provide for development of general retail sales and selected activities. CG zoning district is not intended to provide for heavy commercial activities such as outside commercial service uses or heavy repair. Again, no outside storage is allowed, and self-storage is allowed, but it's limited to no more than 3 acres. This is, again, in the established commercial node. The CI, Commercial Industrial Featured Land Use Designation, is intended to provide for areas for the development of industrial and commercial uses. It's located in areas with suitable levels of service and infrastructure for urban scale and development. And since this is an established commercial industrial featured land use node, no future land use amendment change is proposed as part of this request. As part of all rezoning requests, the board is required to analyze everything against Chapter 902.12 subsection 3. The review criteria is established to determine whether or not the proposed amendment is A, in conflict with any applicable portion of the land development regulations. This request meets the criteria. The requested CG zoning designation is consistent with the property's commercial industrial land use designation. B, the future land use element objective policies 1.17, 1.18, 1.43. The property does remain separated by CL property and does not abut residentially zoned or used property, so it is in compliance with those policy objectives of the comprehensive plan. Objective C, criteria C, is it consistent with the existing proposed land uses? It is, and again, there is no future land use amendment change proposed as part of this request. Is it in compliance with the adopted county thoroughfare plan? Property is at the southwest intersection of Oslo Road and Southwest Avenue, or 27th Avenue Southwest. Generate traffic which would decrease levels of service. As adopted, all roadway segments within the area of influence would operate as an acceptable level of service in the proposed CG zoning. F, economic conditions have transitioned in this area to be more conducive for uses allowed within CG. So we did find that subject to change conditions exist that do warrant an amendment. Criteria G, would it decrease levels of service levels established for sanitary sewer, potable water, solid waste drainage, and recreation? The applicant may be required to pay connection and customary fees. A more detailed concurrency review will be conducted during the development review process. We're also required to review everything on the section 910.07 of the land development regulations for a conditional concurrency review of the rezoning request based upon the most intense use, and based on 2.90 acres, and the 10,000 square foot floor area per acre. The most intense would be 29,000 square foot of retail commercial under both the CL and the CG zoning. And a few more criteria here. H, would the result in a significant adverse impacts on the natural environment? The subject property is currently vacant, so it would need to go under an environmental analysis prior to development. Criteria I, the proposed amendment does align with the comprehensive plan and surrounding land uses and will provide for a logical and orderly development pattern. Criteria J, the request is in harmony with the purpose and intent of the land development regulations. Criteria K, we do find that all currently mandated facilities have adequate capacity to accommodate the most intense use under the proposed zoning district. In conclusion, the requested CG zoning district is compatible with surrounding area, consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the county's adopted concept plan, is consistent with the county's land development regulation, is deemed suitable for CG zoning, and can be supported by staff. And staff does recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend to the Board of County Commissioners approval that this request be rezoned from CL to CG.
Thank you, Cindy. Any commissioner questions of staff on the right?
I have just one.
All right.
I'm assuming that there is not an intended development plan for this property. Is the property just on the market?
I would defer to the applicant for that one. I believe the applicant has been in talks with a few different potential site locators, but I will let him speak on it more.
So we'll deal with that when we open the floor. Go ahead.
My question may also be dealt that way. I was wondering if we could understand a little bit more about what the changed conditions are. It's in item F. And it's about the business climate. I was just curious what that is.
So I can let the applicant answer that a little bit more, but obviously, because of COVID, we've seen a huge change in the business market as a whole. You know, you've seen less storefronts coming in, you've seen closures and bankruptcies that have, large corporations have been downsizing. So with the intended use of the rezoning, the zoning category allows for a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more uses. The reason why it's situated at the corner for that is that that would be a more intensive use for the corner, and then as it transitions to CL, which truly is for residential zoning, as it gets closer to that neighborhood to the east, or excuse me, the west.
See you follow up. Anyone else on the right here? Any questions on the left? Mark?
When the storage unit went in on Route 60 in the city of Vero Beach, I believe we talked about not allowing storage units of that type to be in a highly visible position. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this seems to be a highly visible piece of property on the corner of 27th and Oslo Road. And I noticed, it kind of jumped out to me that one of the changes that the change in zoning allows is storage units. Can you respond to that?
Sure. With the parcel as small as it is, I doubt that there would be any feasibility in having storage units on that site. Typically, what I've seen for a size of a site, now keep in mind, uses are not to be considered during rezonings, but typically a use that would be conducive to a size site as that would be typically a drive-through restaurant or drive-through type establishment.
In those some acres, would it be limited to like one drive-through restaurant, or would there be multiple uses in this rezoned parcel?
So if I may, Susan Prado, Deputy County Attorney, so I think we cannot necessarily look as to what that use is going to be. They have to go based off of what they think the most intense use for that particular zoning is. I think staff has said that whatever the most intense use is, if the most intense use is something that is still compatible, basically the board can only deny the rezoning if they find it that it's either incompatible with the comprehensive plan, if it doesn't meet something that's for the public health and safety, those kinds of reasons, not because perhaps they disagree with the use, whether it be drive-through, storage facility, or the like. So it would have to be something that would, like I said, it would have to be incompatible with a comprehensive plan, and at this point, I don't think staff sees that. So I don't think we cannot contemplate one drive-through, two drive-through storage unit or not. I don't know if that makes sense. but-
All beyond our scope.
Thank you. Yes.
Chip?
And actually, that's partly, the rezoning from CL to CG would allow them to do a drive-through, correct?
Yes.
And, if this was approved for that small section, the balance of the CL that's there would not be able to be rezoned to CG because of the adjacent residential, is that correct?
So if an application came in before staff, we would not be able to support that because there are specific policies within our comp plan for CG being close to residential. The applicant actually had discussions with the long-range planning section and wanted to include a larger portion. However, with discussions with the applicant, going through that whole process, instructed them that staff could only support the corner for more intense uses, as that's what's allowed per our comprehensive plan and our land development regulations.
Yeah, I know that piece has been on the market for quite a long time with numerous people as far as it goes. But making it smaller would allow them to do the density, well, the CG zoning as opposed to that. Okay.
And I think most of your questions will be answered when the applicant or their representative come up, because they can lend a little bit more onto who they've spoken to and what their intended plans are.
Good enough with that in mind. This is a public hearing, so we'll open the public hearing. Microphones on both sides. Name and address, please.
Yes, sir. Hi. Jeff Barquette with Schilke, Biddle and Stoddard, 1717 Indian River Boulevard. Thank you, staff. Really don't have much to add there. I'm sorry. I'm here with Mr. Kennedy also, who can certainly answer questions better than me. But don't have much to add to the staff review. And the end use, as was quoted, is, it's up in the air right now. Hopefully this will allow more diverse use. But to answer your question, sir, heck no, he's not putting many storage there.
Enough.
He leaned over and told me that one. But Mr. Kennedy can expand more on questions if you have any.
Do you want to go ahead and start with your follow-up?
Sure.
Yep.
Sure. So can you just describe a little bit for me what you consider to be the changes in conditions?
Okay, I'm TP Kennedy, 3906 Sable Palm Drive, Vero Beach, Florida. I own the parcel. It's actually 10 acres total. It wraps around, and there's conservation that's already been dedicated that wraps around the backside of the mobile station. So I'm just here for basically the drive-throughs because CL zoning in the county does not have drive-throughs, which I think needs to be changed long-term. But anyways, I'm just trying to improve the restaurant options, coffee options, banking options, which all need drive-throughs for that area. So that's what I'm focused on. I'm not doing any storage. So I own the 3 acres in the front there, and then about 7 acres behind it.
Good for you? Calvin?
EP, no, I think you answered my question at the same time.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Anyone else like to speak on this? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and if there are any additional questions, we'll take them. Otherwise, motion.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Good enough, that passes. Our fourth public hearing is HF Properties rezoning. HF Properties LLC requests to rezone approximately 5.55 acres from CG General Commercial District to CH Heavy Commercial District. Any declaration of ex parte communications? None. Anyone who would like to speak on this, please stand and be sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Very good. Staff presentation.
This is HF Properties LLC rezoning request from CG to CH. The property contains 5.55 acres located between Highway US 1 and Old Dixie Highway, immediately north of 71st Street. Purpose of this request is to rezone the property to CH Heavy Commercial to develop the site with uses permitted in the CH district. This area of the county is characterized by a sparse mixture of commercial and industrial with residential development clustered to the north at 73rd Street. The area south of the subject property is either vacant or more intense commercial and light industrial in character. Here's a zoning map that depicts that. You can see the CH there in the red and the CG orange there to the north with the subject property there in the yellow. And then here's the future land use map. All of that red is the commercial node, commercial industrial node. CG, General Commercial District, is the existing zoning, which is intended to provide for areas of development of general retail sales and selected service activities. It's not intended to provide for heavy commercial activities such as outside commercial service uses or heavy repair services. No outside storage is allowed. Self-storage is allowed in CG, is limited to no more than 3 acres. Here is a snapshot of the two zoning districts side by side, CG and CH. Two different minimum lot areas, lot width, density. There are some differences there. CH is a heavy commercial zoning district intended to provide for establishments engaging in wholesale trade, major repair services, restricted light manufacturing activities, provides for support services necessary for the development of commercial and industrial uses allowed within other non-residential zoning conflicts. Here again, we're talking about something that isn't part of an established commercial industrial future land use node. The commercial and future land use node designation is intended to provide for areas for the development of industrial and commercial uses located along major transportation routes and separated from residential areas. Again, no future land use amendment changes proposed as part of this request. Again, we need to analyze all of our rezoning against Chapter 902.12 subsection 3 and the review criteria, whether or not the proposed amendment is in conflict with any applicable portion of land development regulations. The land use zoning matrix provided in section 911.07 of the county land development regulations, the requested CH zoning designation is consistent with the commercial industrial land use designation. Criteria B, consistent with all the elements of the comprehensive plan. Policies 1.17, 1.18, and 1.43. Nearby properties include uses permitted in CH and IL industrial zoning districts. Therefore, it does meet this criteria. Criteria C, consistent with existing proposed land uses. Proposed CH zoning is consistent with the C commercial industrial, and no future land use is proposed. It's starting to sound repetitive in my own head. Criteria D, in compliance with the adopted county thoroughfare plan, the property is at the northwest corner of Highway US 1 to 71st Street, and the traffic generated would it decrease the levels, all roadway segments within the area of influence would operate at an acceptable level of service under the proposed CH zoning. In criteria F, subject to change conditions, economic conditions have transitioned this area to be more conducive for uses allowed within the CH district due to the presence of the existing CH zoning to the south. And you could see that in the zoning map when I showed you all the CH there to the south in the red. Criteria G, with a decreased level of service status for sanitary sewer, potable water, solid waste, drainage, and recreation. And the applicant, again, may be required to pay the connection customary fees once the development review process begins. And again, we do have to review based upon the most intense use required by section 910.07. The size of the area to be rezoned is 5.55 acres, so the most intense use under the existing is 500 square feet with retail, and then under the most intense proposed CH is over 111,000 square feet of general industrial. Criteria H, would this result in a significant adverse impact on the natural environment? Again, the subject property is vacant, so an environmental analysis would need to be done. Criteria I, would this result in an orderly and logical development pattern? Given that there is existing CH in the area, the proposed amendment does align with the comprehensive plan and the surrounding land uses and would provide for a logical and orderly development pattern. Criteria J, is it in conflict with the public interest? The request is in harmony with the purpose and intent of the land development regulations. Criteria K, we believe that all concurrency mandate facilities have adequate capacity to accommodate the most intense use under the proposed zoning district. In conclusion, the requested CH zoning district is compatible with the surrounding area, consistent with the goals, objectives, and policy that the county's adopt a comprehensive plan is consistent with the county's land development regulation, is deemed suitable for CH zoning, and can be supported by staff. And staff can recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend to the Board of County Commissioners approval of this request to rezone the subject property from CG to CH.
Thank you, Sydney. Any commissioner questions on the left?
I'm assuming that we're not going to get into the concrete plant issue. Would that be because that would require industrial or heavy industrial? And the acreage limit come into play here too?
So that would be correct. So heavy industrial is the only zoning category that allows for a concrete batch plant. And that is not what is requested before this commission tonight.
Okay, and then I guess I ought to raise the same question about the storage. Because it's, again, highly visible, but in more of an industrial area.
So in preliminary talks with the applicant, when the last time we had spoken, they had wanted to do the rezoning to do actual contractor trade offices. Now, that's something that can't be taken into consideration during the rezoning process because it's all of the uses that are allowed. Self-storage would be allowed in that zoning category. It would be up to the owner if they so choose to go with self-storage, but I will let them answer the question to see if they have an end user for the site.
Okay, and do we have, we're upzoning here.
Correct.
Is there a shortage of commercial heavy in this area or anywhere?
So there is vacant commercial, heavy commercial to the south. There is some development plans that have been submitted to our current development for the south portions. In talks with the property owner and the engineer, like I said, they were looking to be able to do contractor trade offices at that location, which there has been a shortage of. And I will let the applicant explain a little bit more if they have an end user, because that would obviously facilitate more of a need to do a rezoning. But with meeting all of the land development regulations and the actual comprehensive plan policies, staff was able to support this request.
Thank you, that's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any to the right, any questions?
I'm just curious, is there anything in our regulations that prohibit storage from highly visible areas?
Not specifically. It has been obviously topic of discussion, and it's something that I know the Board of County Commission has discussed somewhat, but they have never instructed staff yet to look into further reducing it. That is why there is a 3-acre threshold on other zoning categories, but there has been nothing at the BCC level to direct staff.
Thank you.
Calvin?
No, sir.
No? Right. Anything else? This is a public hearing, so we'll open the public hearing. Microphones on each side. Name and address, please.
Good evening, Wesley Mills, Mill Short and Associates, address 700 22nd Place, Vero Beach, Florida, 32960. Representing the applicant tonight, also the property owner, Neil Hockenhall's here tonight as well. Happy to kind of elaborate on some of the questions I heard earlier. So really the rezone, there isn't an end user plan for the property right now. The property's been on the market for over 7 years. My clients owned the property for around 15 years. It just seems like all of the market demand for this property revolves more around uses that would be more conducive into the heavy commercial zoning, most of it relating to business type uses. I don't foresee a self-storage facility going here. There's a large self-storage facility going up on 77th Street, and there's one that just got built to the south. So I don't foresee that being a use. The site is being marketed, but most likely more of a business type use.
Follow-up, Mark?
No, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak on this? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Any additional questions? None? Call for motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, our fifth public hearing is Red Jasmine rezoning, and it's Red Jasmine Land Company LLC's request to rezone approximately 4.2 acres from CL Limited Commercial District to CH Heavy Commercial District. Any declaration of ex parte communications? None. Would anyone who would like to speak on this, please be sworn in. Stand and be sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Thank you. Staff presentation.
This is Red Jasmine Land Company LLC's rezoning request from CL to CH. Property contains 4.20 acres and is located along the US Highway 1 corridor at the northwest intersection of US 1 and 73rd Street. 73rd Street is a key connector linking the established limited commercial node to accommodate convenience-oriented retail needs for the nearby residents. The surrounding land use pattern consists of a mixture of commercial to the north, industrial land to the west across the FEC railroad tracks, and Old Dixie Highway, with sparse development and limited existing retail commercial service uses, which are usually established in clusters or shopping centers. Within a 2-mile radius along the US Highway 1 corridor, there are undeveloped properties zoned CG, general commercial, and CH, heavy commercial, to the north and south of the subject property. Notably, the property does not directly abut the FEC railroad tracks. It is separated by another CL-zoned parcel. Similarly, it does not border Old Dixie Highway. The nearest IG, general industrial zone property, is situated west, buffered by additional CL-zoned property, Old Dixie Highway, and the FEC railroad tracks. Note, I want you to see all of those things I just noticed there. You can see here that the property is adjacent to US 1, but it does not abut the railroad tracks. It is buffered there by a CL property. And then to the south is the CG property, but it is centrally located in an area that is CL. And then here to the south, you can see that it is centrally located in a commercial industrial node in the future land use map. CL, Limited Commercial District, the existing zoning, is intended to provide for areas of development of restricted commercial activities intended to accommodate the convenience of retail and service needs of area residents while minimizing the impact of such activities on any nearby residential areas. No drive-throughs are permitted, no outside activities or storage is permitted. And again, here is CL and CH side by side. Heavy Commercial Zoning District is intended to provide for areas for establishments engaging in wholesale trade, major repair services, and restricted light manufacturing activities. It also provides for services necessary for the development of commercial and industrial uses allowed within other non-residential zoning districts. This is part of an established commercial industrial featured land use node, like I showed you on the featured land use node there in red. The commercial industrial featured land use node designation is intended to provide for areas for the development of industrial and commercial uses located in areas with suitable levels of service and infrastructure for urban scale development, located along major transportation routes and separated from residential areas. And again, no future land use amendment change is proposed as part of this request. We're looking again at the analysis of each rezoning request against Chapter 902.12, subsection 3, and the review criteria. Review criteria A, is it in conflict with any applicable portion of the land development regulations? It is not. The CH zoning designation is consistent with the subject property CI land use designation. It meets this criteria. Criteria B, is the request consistent with the elements of the comprehensive plan? In this instant, it does not meet the criteria. The featured land use element, objective 1, particularly policy 1.43, this request fails to meet the locational criterion for policy 1.43. The property lacks frontage along the railroad tracks, is surrounded by CL zoning, and abuts an occupied non-conforming residence. Criteria C, consistent with the existing proposed land uses, it is. It does not, this request is not requesting change to the future land use designation. Criteria D, is it in compliance with the adopted county thoroughfare plan? Yes, it does abut Highway US 1 and 73rd Street. Would it generate traffic which would decrease levels of service as adopted? And we believe that all roadway segments within the area of influence would operate at an acceptable level of service under the proposed CH zoning. Criteria F, subject to change conditions exist that warrant an amendment. In this instance, we do not believe it meets this criteria. While the Highway US 1 corridor has recently experienced an increase in the development of storage and warehousing facilities, there are already many undeveloped CG, commercial, general commercial, and CH commercial heavy properties within 2 miles of this location outside the established limited commercial area. I showed you that in the pink on the zoning map where this property is centrally located. And introducing additional zoning changes here would disrupt the existing land use patterns. And as you heard in the previous testimony on the zoning application, there are other areas where there are other projects that are being going up in this area. G, criteria G, would decrease levels of service established for sanitary sewer, potable water, solid waste, drainage, and recreation. We believe it meets this criteria. The applicant may be required to pay connection and customary fees, but a more detailed review will be conducted during the development review process. And again, for highest and best use, we review this under section 910.07 of the land development regulations, and based on CL and CH, we would look at an increase at 84,000 square feet of retail commercial. Criteria H, result in significant adverse impacts to the natural environment. The property is mostly vacant. The north end is developed with an existing restaurant. When the new development is proposed, more detailed environmental analysis would be done based on site-specific development proposed. Criteria I, would this result in an Orlean logic of a development pattern? We do not believe that it meets this criteria. While the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, it is not harmonious with the surrounding zoning districts and would disrupt the existing zoning development pattern. This lack of compatibility undermines the goal of achieving an orderly and cohesive development pattern in the area. Criteria J, in conflict with the public interest, and is in harmony with the purpose and interest of the land development regulations. We do not believe it meets this criteria. The request to rezone to heavy commercial in a limited commercial area would introduce higher intensity uses that conflict with the established limited commercial and residential developments in the area, and this would result in significant incompatibility with surrounding zoning districts and disrupt the existing development pattern. Criteria K, any other matters that may be deemed appropriate in review and consideration of the proposed amendment, such as police, fire protection, emergency medical services. At this time, we do not have any, so we believe it meets this criteria, and all concurrency mandated facilities have adequate capacity to accommodate the most intense use under the proposed zoning district. So in conclusion, the request of CH zoning district, we do not believe is compatible with surrounding zoning area, as there is no other CH zone properties within the vicinity. It's not consistent with the goals, objectives, and locational criteria outlined in policy 1.43 of the adopted comprehensive plan. The property is not situated in areas suitable for the heavy commercial CH uses. This property is historically zoned as CL limited commercial. This designation is more appropriate for preserving the area's character and supporting nearby residential developments. Introducing heavy commercial uses would be incompatible with the established zoning and surrounding community. CH heavy commercial is not suitable as it would introduce higher intensity uses that could create substantial incompatibilities with adjacent properties, disrupting the intended balance and harmony of the area. Such a change would undermine the area's character and can negatively impact existing residential and limited commercial uses. And therefore, after thorough consideration of the surrounding land use patterns, compatibility concerns, and consisting with the comprehensive plan and county's land use development regulation, staff's recommendation is to deny the request for rezoning. And if you have questions, both Chris and I are available.
Thank you, Sydney. Any questions on the right?
I have somewhat of a procedural question. This is the first time I've seen an application where staff is recommending denial. So could somebody walk me through what happens next? In other words, if we agree with that, what happens to this application? And if we don't agree with it, what are our options?
Okay, thank you. So I'm glad you asked that, Beth. Ms. Mitchell, I was getting ready to go over that before you all went into your voting. So at this point, you've heard staff's presentation. You obviously will probably hear some rebuttal from the applicant. Any decision that this board makes needs to be based on competent and substantial evidence, whether it is to grant the rezoning or it is to deny the rezoning. The findings of fact should be very clear in whichever manner that you are finding. You know, why it is that you are granting the request, why it is that you are denying the request. I do have case law that talks about denials as well, if that's the route you should choose to go, but either way, it needs to be based on competent, substantial evidence. First and foremost. Secondarily, should this board choose to grant this, it still would go to the Board of County Commissioners for their consideration. Should this board choose to deny this, our specific code under, please excuse me, 902.12 sub, I think that's 3 or 4, I'm sorry, sub 4, sub 4 C and D. It talks about denials of applications, and it basically goes, if you all deny, it goes, the applicant can then appeal to the Board of County Commissioners. They only have 21 days to do that from basically the signing or the issuance of the denial. So those are the two routes that happen. So, but I must caution again that regardless of whatever route you choose, that it must be based on competent, substantial evidence and based on whatever it is they put in front of you, and whether you agree that it meets the comprehensive plan or you disagree that it meets with the comprehensive plan, you need to note all of that information, and those facts must be duly noted in your motion.
What happens in the event of a split decision?
It would still basically lose, because you need to, in order for a rezoning, the request is to rezone. So the burden initially is on the applicant to make that request to rezone. Then it kind of runs to us as to whether or not it actually, us being the government entity, whether or not it actually rezones. If there's a split decision, then it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't get rezoned.
Well, it gets appealed. You can get appealed.
If there's a split decision, I've not seen that before. I believe it would be appealed. I cannot say entirely that it would be appealed or not appealed, considering that it would be a split decision, but considering it would be an automatic denial, I would imagine they would.
Oh, you have anything else on the right?
Curious, one of the reasons that it wasn't compatible was the commercial, it doesn't abut to the railroad track. Can you tell me a little bit more about the ownership of the commercial light land that does abut to the railroad? It seemed like a pretty small sliver.
Policy 1.43, the future land use element requires there's locational criteria, and one of the criteria is that the actual property abuts the railroad tracks. And so the property itself does not abut. There's a piece of property in between. There's actually 39th Street, and then there's a parcel, and then there's Old Dixie, and then there's the railroad. So it does not meet the locational criteria, not just because of parcel ownership, but because of right-of-way as well.
Mr. Chair, if I could say something as well. Cindy, if you could bring back up the actual map that shows the location and zoning. I just want to make some clarification. So in the little arrow, there is a separate parcel that is a legal non-conforming residential use. So in policy 1.43, it states that to rezone to a higher zoning classification, that it protects residential developments. Now, it specifically doesn't say zoning for that purpose. So that is why it fails that criteria. I also want to make note to the property to the south. So you just heard the rezoning for the property to the next parcel down where the actual CG lettering is, and I can pull it up with the mouse. Right here. So that was the one that you just heard in the previous case. The actual owner of that property owned the whole parcel. In discussions with that property owner, the reason why the whole parcel wasn't brought in was exactly the fact of it failing those criterion of not being able to be properly upzoned because of it failing policy 1.43 in reference to the residential development to the northwest.
Thank you. Any questions on the left?
I heard someone mention a restaurant. And also, I'm not clear about the legal non-conforming residential. Could you discuss those two aspects?
Sure. On the north end of the property, there is an existing restaurant. I can't remember the name of it, but there is an existing restaurant to the north end of the property.
Chilling Grill?
Yes, I think so. So for the legal non-conforming property, that property actually existed prior to the zoning classification being applied to that land. So when the zoning classification of CL was applied to that land, the house already was pre-existing. So when the comprehensive plan policies were designed, we had to design around legal non-conforming uses to protect those uses from any rezoning that would upzone and potentially be non-compatible or disrupt the natural harmony of the actual land uses and zoning categories.
Is the restaurant consistent with the rezoning?
The restaurant is actually consistent with the land use that's to the north, and it's consistent in its zoning category as well.
Thank you.
You good on that?
Yes.
All right. This is a public hearing. We'll open the public hearing. Microphones on both sides, name and address, please.
Before we start, at the initial of this, I recall seeing 2 people in the public get sworn in. Everyone else behind did not stand to be sworn, so all of you would need to be sworn in before you make any statements. So I just wanted to make sure we get that done. Thank you.
Swear him in now?
Yes, that would be great.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Good evening, Rebecca Grohall, MBV Engineering, 1835 20th Street, Vero Beach, 32960. Here tonight on behalf of Red Jasmine Land Development Company, and I wanted to just talk more about the staff analysis. We do have a presentation. Next slide, please. Again, it's a 4.2 acre parcel. It is, we are requesting the CH commercial heavy from the CL. It does maintain the CI future land use node. I just want to briefly introduce the property owner's representative. He is sworn in, Damian Brinks, and we would like to just review a couple of points in the staff recommendations. So next slide, please. This is our site. I think you've seen that. The parcel, and if I could ask a question of staff, the parcel that's CG, the lower half of that was just recommended for approval to CH. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay, and then beneath that, just to the south of that, it's CH. I think it's incorrectly shown on your zoning map still as CG, but that was rezoned this summer in the June, July timeframe to CH. So next slide, please. Again, we are right between US 1 and Old Dixie Highway. We do have some fingertip connectivity to Old Dixie Highway, as well as the FEC Railroad Corridor. It would be great at some point in time if we could produce and pick up that parcel immediately to our west. The US 1 corridor currently has 120 feet of right-of-way, and the FDOT is looking to expand that right-of-way. It is subject to another 31 feet eminent domain off of our site, and we anticipate that that's going to significantly increase the trips along US Highway 1. There is a non-conforming existing residential use adjacent to the site. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but otherwise, the next closest residential home is over 270 feet from the subject property. A lot of that is the US Highway 1 right-of-way. And the property is south. Again, we just talked about this. We're recently rezoned from CH to CG. If you want to skip to our next slide. So this is the right-of-way dedication where we're looking at 31 feet, and that would also impact the restaurant to the north, which is an existing use within the CL. Next slide. Our site, the pre-app meeting to rezone to CH, that's the arrow you saw, you just heard that case to rezone to CH, and that's just one parcel connectivity to our south. And then the recently rezoned parcel just south of that also went from CG to CH. So this is a corridor that's rapidly changing. There is a lot of movement and direction on this site. So next slide. I do want to talk about this where staff says that the use could significantly disrupt the existing character of the area, which is much more aligned with the limited commercial and residential uses. I think based upon the applications that we've seen come before this board, again, this corridor is changing and it is moving to the CH uses, commercial heavy along this interstate. So next slide, please. Interesting enough, in the comp plan, this property is within the commercial corridor. The segment itself is shown as only 38% developed. And I think the reason we're seeing that there's not a higher level of development along this corridor is simply because the zoning, it doesn't match the current demands for the properties. And that, again, is reflective upon the applications coming forward to staff and to this board for rezoning. Next slide. The non-conforming residential. In discussing this, while we recognize that you want to protect that, it is an existing single-family home in a CL already zoned property within the commercial industrial node. How much longer they can hang on, I don't know, but we would be willing to adequately buffer for it. I do want to also talk about in the Land Development Code, Section 904, within the purpose and intent, this is the chapter that talks about nonconformities. It quite clearly states that The further purpose and intent of this chapter is to promote the phasing out of non-conforming structures and uses. So I want to lay that out for you tonight too. Next slide. I'm here to answer any questions, again, with MBV Engineering and Damien. And Cindy, if you could just jump ahead one more slide, I think. And one more. One more. Oh, I don't know. Okay. So that is then the end of my presentation. I am happy to answer any questions. I have Damien here tonight too, the owner's representative, and I know there's a number of people in the audience who would like to speak, so I'll yield the microphone to them. Thank you.
Next.
My name is Santiago Eres. My address is 7405 36 Court, which is a residential community about maybe 200 feet from this property. And I also own the lot across the street, which is a CL 7350, right across the street from US 1. And I think the changing this to CH could impact not only my resident, also like 15 homes, so they're like maybe across the street from me. And I like to say, go ahead, do your best with the property, but I think it is very close to a residential community. And CH, for what I understand, what I've seen before, it could, it has a broad purpose. So I really want to kind of think about this a little bit. And that's, I guess I get the letter because I'm 300, I think I'm less than 300 feet from that property. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name's Andrew Eli. I own the adjoining property at 73rd. My initial understanding, it would be possibly upgraded to general. I'm not comfortable with it being upgraded to heavy. It makes us very vulnerable to any kind of business that might come in there, and I'm just asking the board to deny.
Thank you.
Donna Richards, we're at 7360 36 Court, and we're in the community directly across US 1 with 25 homes. And I mean, we have the train here now that we have enough noise. Really hope you would deny heavy commercial there. And so does everybody else in our community. Unfortunately, they can't make it tonight, but I would hope they would want to beautify US 1 instead of having heavy commercial all along US 1, which is a nice road. Thank you for your.
Thank you.
Is this active?
Yeah.
I'm Mark Eli. I am a resident at 3890 73rd Street, which is on the other end of the restaurant. This is our home. I would ask that you would deny this. We already have enough noise, and we're concerned about that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Damian Brink, representing the ownership here. Address is 100 Puglisi's Way, Suite 200, Delray Beach, Florida, 33444. This area of the county is where these type of high commercial uses should go, between a major corridor, US 1, and Dixie Highway, and the CSX Railroad. In fact, our property is actually closer to the industrial cement plant than previous rezonings just to the south of us that just received your recommendation for commercial high. We think this is appropriate. And the zoning code, as you develop property, you're required to do buffers. You're required to enhance the property. And we were proposing to do an enclosed type of RV and boat storage to protect people's million-dollar investments. That's one of the ideas we had to do here. We think the project would not be intensive to surrounding properties. I also want to point out, staff appears to suggest that policy 1.43 are required criteria. It clearly states in the comp plan, these criteria may be used by the county commission to approve a rezoning. So, just because we don't abut the railroad doesn't mean you can't hear it. And I will say, for those that live on the east side of US 1, as development grows north along US 1, any buildings that are placed on those properties would potentially buffer that noise from the railroad. So we think this is an opportunity. We think the properties, we actually purchased the property a year ago because we see the development moving north up US 1. And like I said, we think it's a great property for development, and we think it's more appropriate. It feels underzoned, and we feel it'd be more appropriate with commercial high. I appreciate your consideration on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any commissioner questions of the public?
I do have one question, and it concerns your presentation. Please clarify for me, I probably misunderstood, but I thought that you referred to the fact that the property that was rezoned earlier in the meeting to commercial heavy abutted the southern end of your property.
It's separated by one.
Correct.
I don't know if you wanted to bring that map back up.
No,
But
I know it's
part of
separated.
that
I
CG
thought
is-
that you referred to the fact that it abuts your property.
No, it is separated by one. I appreciate clarifying that. And then the property to its south is also CH.
Thank you. Any other questions? We'll close the public hearing. Any additional discussion? Call for motion?
I'll make a motion to approve staff's recommendation to deny the request for the rezoning based on compatibility concerns and surrounding land use patterns.
When you say compatibility concerns in the surrounding land use, what are you referencing in there?
As
I
referenced,
just want to clarify.
as referenced in staff's report. The CH zoning versus the CG zoning, the adjacent
Could you
part.
use the mic?
I'm sorry, yeah, I'm sitting back here. The lack of continuity of the proposed rezoning, the staff's comments as to the compatibility of the surrounding area as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I just wanted you to clarify your motion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There is a second to the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes. I think we will take a 10-minute break before diving into the final public hearing. So 7:38, we'll resume. Let's re-adjourn for the final public hearing, please. The final public hearing tonight is Wabasso Point rezoning, Donald C. Proctor Sr. and CJB Holdings Limited Partnerships request to rezone approximately 22.28 acres from CG General Commercial District to OCR, Office Commercial Residential District. Any ex parte communication reports? None. Would anyone who would like to speak on this as part of this public hearing, please stand and get sworn in?
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes. Thank you. Staff presentation.
Last but not least, Donald C. Proctor Sr. and CJB Holdings Limited Partnerships rezoning requests from CG to OCR. Subject property consists of approximately 22.28 acres of undeveloped land. It is located in the northern area of the county on the west side of Highway US 1, 0.65 miles north of 510. The purpose of this request is to rezone the property to OCR, Office Commercial and Residential District, which permits professional offices, health clinics, and multiple family dwellings. The property is southwest of the City of Sebastian's jurisdiction and north and west of the Wabasso School, and approximately 580 feet of US Highway 1 frontage. Currently zoned general commercial, the property is within a large undeveloped commercial node extending east to west between Highway US 1 and the FEC Railroad right-of-way. From north to south, the commercial node, though featuring a mix of conforming and non-conforming commercial and residential structures, remains adequately utilized within its current zoning designation. Here's a zoning map, which shows you there that it's in the very large commercial node of CG. And then again, there's the future land use map, which shows you that CI, commercial industrial node CI in red. CG, General Commercial District, is intended to provide for areas of development with general retail sales and selected service activities. CG zoning district is not intended to provide for heavy commercial activities such as outside commercial service uses or heavy repair services. No outside storage is allowed. Self-storage in CG is limited to no more than 3 acres. Here's a look at CG and OCR next to each other. Very similar. OCR limits your number of units to 6 units per acre with a minimum open space of 35%. Office Commercial and Residential District proposed zoning is intended to provide area for the development of restricted office, commercial, and residential activities in a manner that will be compatible with surrounding neighborhoods. Intended to provide land use controls to ensure the separation of potentially incompatible activities such as intense commercial uses from established residential areas. Intended to be located at the perimeter of large commercial nodes to provide transition between commercial areas and residential areas. Again, this is part of an established commercial industrial future land use node, which is a commercial industrial future land use node. Use designation is intended to provide areas for the development of industrial and commercial uses, located in areas with suitable levels of service and infrastructure for urban scale and development, located along major transportation routes and separated from residential areas. No future land use amendment is proposed as part of this request. And again, analysis per chapter 902.12 subsection 3, the review criteria. Criteria A, is it in conflict with any applicable portion of the land development regulations? The OCR zoning designation is consistent with the subject property's CI use designation. However, a mix of uses may not be compatible with surrounding land uses. Criteria B, consistent with all the analysis of the comprehensive plan, we find that this does not meet the criteria. In particular, policy 1.43 It fails to meet the locational criteria. It is not adjacent to existing office uses as required. It would not serve as a buffer between residential commercial districts, and it is not at a node perimeter. Criteria C, consistent with existing proposed land uses. The proposed OCR zoning is consistent as it is in an existing commercial industrial future land use designation. Criteria D, in compliance with adopted county thoroughfare plan, property does have Highway US 1 frontage. Criteria E, would it generate traffic, which would decrease levels of service? We do not believe the proposed zoning of OCR would decrease the levels of service. Criteria F, subject to change conditions exist. We do not believe that there are any conditions. It does not meet this criteria. The subject properties are situated in the middle of an existing commercial node that remains largely undeveloped, and these conditions have not significantly changed. Criteria G, would the levels of service established for sanitary sewer, potable water, solid waste, drainage, and recreation? A more detailed concurrence review would be conducted during the development review process if such land was to be developed. Based on the most intense use per section 910.07 of the land development regulations, under the most existing proposed, they would have the same square footage of retail commercial. Criteria H, would the result in a significant adverse impacts to the natural environment? Subject property is currently vacant, so a detailed environmental analysis would need to be done before development was conducted. Result in an orderly and logical development pattern. We do not find that this meets this criteria. The proposed amendment would not provide for a logical and orderly development pattern. The OCR zoning district is a transitional zoning district. Criteria J, is it in conflict with the public interest and is in harmony with the purpose and interest of the land development regulation? It does not meet this criteria. This request is not in harmony with the purpose and intent of the land development regulations. The OCR district is designed to complement and enhance existing development, and again, this area is largely vacant. Criteria K, any other matters may deemed appropriate. At this point, the concurrency mandated facilities have adequate capacity to accommodate the most intense use in this area. In conclusion, the requested OCR zoning district is incompatible with surrounding area development patterns. It's not consistent and does not align with the goals, objectives, and locational criteria outlined in policy 1.3 of the adopted comprehensive plan. And the property is not situated in areas suitable for transitional zoning. It is not at a perimeter of the commercial industrial node. So therefore, staff cannot support the request to rezone the subject properties from CG to OCR, and we cannot recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission advise the Board of County Commissioners to approve this request. And staff's recommendation is for the Planning and Zoning to recommend denial of this request. We can answer any questions.
Sydney, any commissioner questions of staff on the left here? No? Any commissioner questions of staff on the right?
No, sir.
All right. In that case, this is a public hearing. We'll open the public hearing. Microphones on each side, name and address, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the board, my name is Pete Sweeney. I'm an attorney with the firm of Block and Scarpa. My address is 601 21st Street. I have a presentation, if it could be brought up, and if I can have you cue it through. Thank you very much. Of course, this is for the Wabasso Point project. This is requesting a rezoning, a downzoning from CG down to OCR. And if you could take me to the next slide, lead you into why this board should recommend approval despite staff's recommendation of denial. I'm going to take you through. These are actual overheads, so you can see the zoning map sometimes fails to provide the reality of the situation, which is there is no commercial development in this area. So fundamentally, if you're basing a decision on competent substantial evidence, you would be looking at this map and you would have to identify where the commercial development is that would be in conflict with our request. And as you can see, there are 3 parcels. The first parcel is the master parcel right here with frontage on US 1 and directly abuts, as you'll see, the Wabasso School directly to the south. It also has the FEC railroad tracks. You heard conversation earlier tonight. We do directly abut that. And directly to the west of that is the Johns Island West Golf Club, which is actually zoned RM6. If we can continue to the next slide, there are actually 3 parcels. This is a very small 0.39 parcel, which directly abuts, also US 1. And if you can continue to the next slide, the 3rd parcel, again, there is nothing there. As you see directly to the north, this is the only other property contiguous to us that is developed. It's a non-conforming single-family residence, which is clearly not general commercial. It is a holdover from the rezoning of this entire development corridor from time unknown. If we could continue to the next slide, I think this will start to show the 3 X's identify exactly where the parcels collectively adding up to the 23, almost 23 acres are. And what I really importantly want to show you, the other 2 that you'll see there are large parcel. Both are non-conforming single-family residences. You will also see the Wabasso School that we mostly abut, and directly below that is a mobile home park, clearly not a commercial endeavor, and actually is non-conforming because it would fall within the residential zoning district. It is not a commercial district, but that is what it is. Keep in mind, most importantly, you will see directly there in the light purple across the street, OCR zoning. There is already precedent, not just generally, but less than 300 feet from our boundary lines, OCR. And that actually was rezoned within the last 4 years, I believe. Staff certainly can correct me if I'm incorrect on that. But what is going in back there is a very large development. It's currently underway, and it was broken up through a rezoning process approved by this board into several parcels, including the PD. But the OCR, which is where townhomes are going up, certainly very shortly, lends credence to the fact that this particular set of parcels is incorrectly zoned right now as CG, general commercial. In fact, we're asking to downzone, still within the future land use category of commercial, to OCR. And at that point, I'm going to start to talk about some of the reasons. Now, you just heard staff's report. And again, this is a quasi-judicial hearing, so anything that they say is subject to cross-examination would have to be proved. The first is we do agree with most of the stuff that's in the report, but what we take some exception with is, number 1, the suggestion that there is no office otherwise. First of all, everything in the CG, if you look at the zoning chart of available uses, every single type of office space you can think of is already allowed in CG. So just because no other offices have been built there, it's a misstatement to suggest that there's no other office-compatible zoning next door. In fact, everything is. It's even more reinforced by the OCR across the street. The second part is what could go there. Obviously, a much more intense. Currently, what would be allowed? A hotel could go there. A liquor store could go there. A car wash could go there. A drive-through restaurant. A car dealership. You're going to hear some testimony in just a minute from both the owners and the agent who's been working on this for several years. There is just simply no appetite for that, and that's going to speak to the change conditions, which staff has said there are no change conditions. But you're going to hear testimony that, in fact, significantly changed conditions. The third part is that, and we submitted this along with our application. Ms. Prado, if I can approach you. What we have here is a letter of representation. I'm sorry, support. If you can go to the next slide, Chris. And there you see where we have, in fact, I misspoke. It's actually less than 200 feet from our border OCR is, so we already are within that and the precedent is there. But if you can go to the next slide, Chris. This is a letter, and if Ms. Prado can pass that down to you. Dr. David Moore, our school board superintendent, authored on behalf of our group in support of rezoning this to OCR with the idea that if residential were to be developed in the form of townhomes, multifamily, which is allowed in OCR, but also is allowed right now in the CG through an administrative approval process. So let's not suggest that this isn't something that could happen. It's a different procedure, but it could happen right now. The school board has suggested they would be willing not only just to support, but enthusiastically support our proposition that we would set aside 10% of the property to be able to support residential development for their employees of the Indian County School District. And this is really important because this leads me to a fourth point, which is one of the things that the staff report says at page 3, and you saw this a little bit earlier. This is the future land use element under item B from staff's report, policies 1.17 and 1.18. future land use element states that all commercial and industrial uses must be located within the county's urban service area. Now, I'm certainly sure this board is aware of the discussion and review of the urban service boundary that's been going on for the past year with the county. Mr. Bolter led that, and the presentation was just approximately 2 weeks ago. And as a result of that workshop, a pretty clear directive was given to staff that the urban service boundary apparently will not be extended, with the finite discussion that there is more than enough of developable area within the county USB as it sits. And this project would support that directive from the Board of County Commissioners. This collective of almost 23 acres, if it were allowed to be rezoned to OCR and did move in the direction of multifamily residential townhomes, quite frankly, would totally support that comprehensive plan element, the directive from the board, maintaining the current USB, while also, as I continue on to the 3 reasons why they said it does not meet 1.43, number 1, adjacent to existing office uses. Well, they said no in staff's report, but quite frankly, again, I believe that's misleading because office uses are completely allowed within the CG zoning. This would just be supportive of that in, quite frankly, a lesser, as you saw, by unit type and also by open area from the CG zoning. The second is there is a buffer between residential zoning districts and arterial roads or other commercial zoning districts. Chris, if we could go back just one more slide, please. Thank you. If you look to the west, the Johns Island Golf Course is in fact zoned RM6. That is clearly a residential zoning. You have residential zoning across the street, not only through the PD, but also through the RM6 development, significant development across all of that area. And I would posture to this board that not only is the school, but the mobile home park and all of those bordering single-family residences, those are not commercial general parcels. Those are holdover, non-conforming, single-family residential. If anything, I would strenuously argue that rezoning this does in fact provide a buffer, not only from the west, also from the industrial to the south, the commercial light, and as you move north on US 1, potentially more commercial, whether general or heavy. The third point that they said it is not at a node perimeter. Well, I'm not sure what the definition of perimeter is, but as you can see in the bottom right of the screen there, that's where the Wabasso Bridge comes around. And it may not be at exactly the corner, which is not a requirement within the code, as I would also agree with the prior speaker who said these are elements that may be considered, not are definitive. So you are free to disagree with staff's interpretation of any of these items. And in fact, I believe that you should, because quite frankly, I believe that they're not accurate the way they've been interpreted. If we move on to the last 2 things that they have said, the first conclusion is that it would result in, not result in orderly and logical development patterns, but at no point can you hear anything in staff's report saying exactly what the negative implication would be of downzoning this to OCR. And the last is, would it be in harmony with the public interest and the purpose and interest of the land development regulations? Again, this is a lesser intensity. Clearly, there has been no development in the area. There's an opportunity to maintain the harmony of the commercial future land use, which this is within. It's just what I would call little brother, while allowing a little bit more flexibility. Also, the support of the school board, that's not going anywhere. The school's not going anywhere. That's not suddenly going to become something else. And I would strongly, I'm going to bring up here in a minute Mr. T.P. Kennedy, who can talk about the change conditions in the general economic environment. So that's all I have for my presentation at this point, and I would yield the floor to Mr. Kennedy. And TP, if you can just introduce yourself, talk about your background and how long you've worked on this project.
I'm TP Kennedy, 3906 Sable Palm Drive, Vero Beach, Florida. I've worked on this property for over 7 years. It's general commercial from 45th Street in Gifford all the way through Sebastian. We have a world of commercial up there. I call it dead man's land because no one ever goes there because there's nothing to do. You know, there's a little piece here, a little piece there, but overall, you know, since my whole lifetime, I'm 4th generation here in town, we have way too much commercial. You know, the market's changing. COVID changed everything again. A lot of this could be, you know, affordable housing for a lot of people. So we had discussions 4 or 5 years ago with a storage unit guy, but it was more than 3 acres, so they needed CH zoning. So we came in and talked to staff at that time about upzoning to CH. Well, there wasn't support of that because of the Wabasso School to the south, so they couldn't support that. So we even says, well, maybe we want to do industrial because we actually border industrial on the west side too, but they wouldn't support that. So, you know, it comes down to, you know, residential is the best fit for that. It's the best fit for around the school. You can have a 24-hour Walmart. You can have an ABC liquor store there. Is that what we want? No, I think we want a nice townhome development that wraps around the school, and we have the support from the school. So this fits the area. This fits the Wabasso area. Immediately across the street, you have D.R. Horton, which is on OCR zoning, which has gotten done in the last few years. It is townhome development too. Immediately across the street, you also have offices in that PD, that little PD district. There's a couple contractors and another office in there with a sub shop. I personally, in 2005, was part of, it was called Orchid Landing at that time. WCI bought it. It's since transitioned to Pulte. And we took 25 acres, my dad and I, and downzoned it to OCR. Same scenario as this for residential, and now Pulte's finally building on it. So there is precedence here. It's not going to stop here. It'll go straight to the county commission, but you know, this is time to make a stand, and we need more developments like this, low intensity. I represent a couple of landowners to the north of this, and they would much rather have RM6, RM8 land rather than general commercial. So please see it that we can have this motion. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I want to go ahead and introduce also Mr. Chris Marine and 2 of the owners and yield the floor to them.
Good evening. I'm Christopher Marine. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Gould Cooksey Fennell. My office is 979 Beachland Boulevard. I represent the owners, not the applicant, represent the owners of the property. The owners are here tonight. One is an individual and one is a trust. This property is like a lot of other property and a lot of other real estate in Indian River County. It used to be in citrus. There's lots of it. And it's being transitioned, or it's been transitioned out of citrus. And you got to figure out what to do with it. You got to figure out what to do with it. And we don't always get it right. I served on a board for the city of Vero Beach, and I served on the Board of Adjustment for Indian River County for many years, and I've dealt with a lot of these issues. And when these regulations are drafted, when these things go into place, we don't always get it right. And I don't think they got it right here. Most of the property has been owned by the trust over 40 years, like 42 years, something like that. One of the owners is a very successful and respected developer and general contractor in our community. If he couldn't get it done as commercial, I'm not sure who could. I mean, he's been around quite a long time and has many, many of these projects under his belt. And yet, it's been listed for years, like Mr. Kennedy said, and yet here it sits vacant. After all these years, here it sits still vacant. And we just submit there's a reason for that, a very clear reason for that. It's the wrong zoning. This property is not suitable for general commercial development in any way, shape, or form. And that's why you have the big expanse that was shown in those aerials of nothing going on. So I know that staff has recommended that you deny this rezoning request, and I know why. I mean, I've worked with staff for many years, and they have their job to do, and they have the analysis that they have to conduct. But we're confused by it in this instance and just don't agree with it. We don't think that an OCR zoning is much of a stretch. We don't think it's much of a stretch here at all. It's not a big jump. For a number of reasons. The first reason is the future long-term land use designation for this property is commercial industrial. And OCR is clearly one of the permissible zoning designations within commercial industrial. So this is one of the zoning classifications. You have a choice to apply to different properties within a commercial industrial node. Again, not much of a stretch, doesn't seem to fit the criteria, but we just submit that it's applying the code to this particular piece of property is a square peg trying to be pushed into a round hole. So it's fully compatible at OCR with the long-term land use, one. Two, it's a downzoning application. We're not asking to go from, general commercial to heavy commercial or light industrial to heavy industrial or from, some form of residential zoning to commercial zoning. Going the other way, downzoning. And I know there was some commentary in the staff's comments that OCR and general commercial are pretty similar in terms of what type of commercial development you can do. Don't get misled by that. And I'm not suggesting that they intentionally misled you. They're just doing an analysis of the code. But don't be misled by this because there's no intention whatsoever to do commercial development here. It just doesn't work. And the stuff that could be done in OCR can be done in general commercial right now. That's not what's planned. It's just not going to work. The other thing I wanted to point out, and I'm not going to go on too much longer because I think Mr. Sweeney did a really good job in covering it, is that the solution in the future has already revealed itself here, right? I mean, right across US 1 is new residential development with an OCR zoning, Orchid Reserve. It's a D.R. Horton development. And it's getting off the ground nice. That's literally across US 1 from this property. So somebody figured it out, you guys, I guess, at some point. But this is what we're seeking. We're asking you to grant the rezoning request. The owners endorse it, obviously. They'd like to see you recommend to the county commission to approve it. Thanks so much, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Donald C. Proctor, 218 Rudder Road, Vero Beach. I've been a resident of Indian River County for 51 years, but I've been coming here since 1959. So I know a little bit about the county. It was 25,000 people here when I was here to begin with. My family's been very involved here. We've probably built, I don't know how many thousands of units in Indian River County. Nothing that I wouldn't live in myself, I can tell you that. So when I see people that work here not be able to live here, it bothers me. When you have people that can't live in our county that work here because they can't afford to live here. This is an opportunity to have somebody build things that people can actually afford to buy. They've offered school teachers, firemen, policemen, whatever, a 10% reduction in whatever the prices are, which are more reasonable than anything else around them, from what I see. And I think it's a great opportunity for our community to allow something like this. I think if the OCR is a designation, there's no better place to put it than right here next to the Wabasso School, which it's a great buffer for something else coming in there that's going to be a disruptor. So, like I say, I've been in development business all my life, not just the 51 years. I've been around it since 1951 with my father. We came up here when Dade County was 200,000 people. And, Vero Beach is a beautiful place, but we're really losing it for our people that cannot afford to buy housing. And that's why I'm here to support it. So the people that were one of my partners was Charles Bradshaw, who owned the property behind mine. His family now is just his children. He's passed away, his wife's passed away. And this is an estate piece that they have for his children and for them to have whatever proceeds come out of it. So, and mine is something that, I'm putting into the thing because I believe in it. So I'd appreciate y'all if you'd support it too. We need it here. That's what I say. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Proctor. Anyone else? Are there any commissioner questions of the presenters? On the right?
I have one,
Okay.
and any and all of you could answer this. I'm trying to envision, I know where the Wabasso School is. This property is north of 510. Approximately how far?
Can we put
Half
the
a
map?
mile? And the reason that I asked that, the comment earlier, no commercial, there is, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's an old Cumberland Farms there that was converted to a medical office? Yes. And so is it yet north of that? Okay, thank you.
Just north of the school.
Thank you.
I have a question of staff. How many other schools are in a commercial zoning, general commercial in Indian River County? Is that typical?
I don't know the exact number offhand. It is allowable, so it is an allowable use. There are some that are in a commercial district. There are some that are not in a commercial district. I just don't know the number offhand.
Curious.
Mr. Chair, if I could also speak on behalf of staff for a rebuttal to Mr. Sweeney's testimony. He did a brilliant job of painting his picture, but I would like to clear up some inaccuracies. In reference to multifamily being allowed on the actual zoning of the CG and the underlying CI land use. So in our general commercial zoning district, we only allow multifamily residential as accessory to a permitted commercial use, and it has to be accessory to that use. So it would not be allowed to be a standalone multifamily development. As well as the comment about the USB. So the USB's actual wrap-up and final recommendation report is in its draft format, but on the discussion that was directed by the Board of County Commission, one of the recommendations was to look at the existing densities and intensities within the existing urban service boundary. This property is within the existing urban service boundary. However, the caveat to that is that it's all of the properties that are correctly zoned for their uses. That is what the report said, that we have allowable future population growth within the urban service boundary. That does not take into account any rezonings for said parcels. The other thing, I'd like to go back to Mr. Proctor's testimony for affordable housing in this community. Obviously, I don't know if the board is aware, but I am the chair, the staff liaison for the AHAC committee, and I was the former SHIP administrator. And affordability is a big factor within this community, and it is needed. But that is why the Live Local Act was brought before the actual Florida governor brought it into law. We actually would support the Live Local going on this location because that is what it's designed for. It is designed to be able to put on industrial or commercial zone land, multifamily, that builds in affordable criteria. And in discussions with the property owners and I believe Concordia Group was the group at the time, we had suggested they go that route because that was what we could properly support. Within our existing comprehensive plan, it is pretty specific on the criteria for OCR. The OCR does have to meet those criteria. There are three criteria. In the first criteria, it says that it has to be adjacent to existing office uses. The key word is existing there. It's not the proposed, it's not built yet, it is existing office uses. The next criteria is buffered between residentially zoned districts and commercial zone districts. This is neither. There's limited commercial to the south, and there's general commercial to the north. The other thing is that at node perimeters, the reason why it's stated as node perimeters and the intent that was built in when this was designed in the comprehensive plan was so that it could properly transition from a node, commercial nodes obviously transition back to residential. So in office, commercial, residential, that allows that transition to properly have those less intense uses and not be put in the center of a commercial node so that it is properly and compatible for the area. And that's all I have.
Okay,
If I,
the group on the left had no chance to ask questions about the presenters. Any questions?
I have to state a comment really quick. I wanted to state it before we keep going back and forth. Just to clarify what the policy does say, because it looks like the staff report says May, and I know the last commenter said May, but I pulled up the actual comp plan to get the exact language for the board so you can decide with a clear and open mind here. It's policy 1.43 says the Board of County Commissioners shall rezone land only in a manner that is consistent with the future land use element table 2.14. Furthermore, the board recognizes that not every zoning district allowed in the land use designation is appropriate for every site within that land use designation. For any parcel, the Board of County Commissioners may deny a rezoning request even when the requested zoning district is consistent with the parcel's land use designation. If the denial serves a legitimate public purpose, a Board of County Commissioners determination that the requested zoning district is not appropriate for the parcel may also be based upon the absence of the following local criteria. And that's where it says that the OCR office of Commercial Residential Zoning District adjacent to the existing official uses as a buffer between the residential zoning districts and arterial roads or other commercial zoning districts or at a node perimeters. So it does have those things as those things that can be considered. They may also be based on that. It doesn't say the board has to consider that, but it does say above that the only shall that I see in there is for that it has to be consistent with the future land use element table 2.14. I will note that I don't know that that's consistent with our code, though. 902.12 sub 3, I'm sorry, B, but that's for the sides to argue. But I just, from a legal standpoint, so you guys can know exactly what it says instead of just that small snippet.
Donald Proctor again. I'd just like to say that, you know, the Wabasso School there is a specialty school. And there isn't anything that's going to be better than residential next to that. You've got the largest piece of property that's along that node there that could be utilized. And it can either be residential, it could be something else. I don't know what else could even make sense there, to tell you the truth, as far as all the things that I've been involved in. So, and to get some affordable housing there would be great for our county. So that's all I really have to say about it. It's definitely the highest and best use for that property. So that's, I'd just like to say thank you very much for your time.
I do have one quick question on that. Is there a reason why the Live Local isn't being used if you're looking for affordable housing, since that has clear guidelines as to what's affordable?
Pardon me?
Is there a reason why the Live Local Act is not being used, since it has clear statutory guidelines as to what's affordable?
I would have somebody else answer that. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Prado, board members. Please keep in mind, Live Local is not a zoning procedure. What we are here on tonight is a rezoning application, and this much to Ms. Prado's counsel very early in this meeting, suggesting that uses ultimately which would come in through a site plan, right? That is not to be considered. Live Local would be, in fact, Live Local would completely bypass this board completely and would not give any information or input from either this board or from the county commission. But that's not a zoning application. That is a site development application. So fundamentally, that's probably putting a horse in front of the cart. Instead, what we are here is to move forward with a rezoning application, which if a denial is recommended, and I do agree with Ms. Prado that there's a clear problem between what the comp plan says and the decision-making authority under element 1.43 versus your Indian River County Land Development Code, and suggesting that this board has the final decision-making authority. But regardless of whatever that decision is, it would have to be based on competent, substantial evidence as to why you would, if you did, deny it, that you'd have to articulate on the record today. And I do agree with you. That's absolutely fundamentally the law in Florida. And anything less than that would be subject to not only appeal, but reversal. And I think that's just, whether I say that, whether Ms. Prado says that, or when any other board-certified local government attorney were to say that, that's the state of the law. So we respectfully request that we've met all of the elements, that in fact, we have proved by competent substantial evidence that a rezoning would be appropriate to move forward from the current CG down to OCR, that the contraindications from staff, in fact, have been met, and that there is no remaining items, and you should, in fact, recommend approval for the rezoning.
If I may, if that's the case, I would like to respond then, Mr. Sweeney, and state that then the board, if that is the case, that you're not wanting to take in future considerations, then all of the testimony about the future uses of homes and affordable housing should not be taken into consideration when they are dealing with the fact finding in this case, as the only thing they can take into consideration would be the highest and best use of the, well, not the highest and best use, but the highest intensive use that they can use in this zoning district.
And if that in fact is the case, and I appreciate you saying that, if in fact the basis for the decision should be the highest and most intense use, staff's unrefuted presentation is that the current zoning is a much more intense use than our requested rezoning. There is zero evidence to refute that. Thank you.
Any questions?
Well, I hate to play attorney, but because I heard some ifs and shalls, can you go back to that a little bit? Because when I heard the word if, it was something that aroused interest.
So basically, we're required, this particular section is saying that the Board of County Commissioners shall rezone a land that is consistent in the manner consistent with the future land use element of table 2.14. So they have a requirement to rezone the land so long as it's consistent with that. But then it goes on to say that for any parcel, the Board of County Commissioners may deny a rezoning request, even when the requested zoning district is consistent with the parcel's land use designation, if the denial serves a legitimate public interest. So what that's saying is basically, even though it meets the criteria where they shall grant it, that they have the ability to deny it if it serves a legitimate public interest. And then that's where it goes on to say the Board of County Commissioners' determination that the requested zoning district is not appropriate for the parcel may also be based upon the absence of the following locational criteria for the OCR office, commercial residential zoning district. It's adjacent to existing offices uses as a buffer between residential zoning districts and arterial roads or other commercial zoning districts, or at a node perimeters. Those are the ones where it says they may also be based upon the absence of the following. So with that being said, those are the reasons, and the case law on this does back that up, that it does have to be, say, something for a legitimate public purpose. It's that, or for it not complying with one of the actual comp plan requirements are both reasons for, under the case law basis for denial, as upheld even by the Supreme Court in the.
So couldn't
Snyder case.
Couldn't the denial based on legitimate public purposes be turned around to say an approval of rezoning be allowed based on legitimate public interest?
I have not seen that in the case law, and that's not what this specifically says. It just specifically says if the denial serves a legitimate public purpose.
Personally, I'm struggling to find the public interest in a denial, and I'm leaning towards being swayed by Mr. Sweeney's testimony.
It's this board's job to take the evidence of both sides, weigh it, and determine what you find and make your determination based on the competent substantial evidence. So that is your job, whether it be for approval or denial. That is this board's job.
And I support staff's position because they can only work with what they have as opposed to, the real world that's out there that there's more gray area than there's black and white. To me, always, not just this specific situation, but in that respect. But, it talks about not being adjacent to residential. Well, if it becomes residential, and the question then is office, commercial, residential, it could be whatever, correct? We cannot say if you approved a rezoning, it has to be residential. We can't do that.
Correct.
So that's part of where I was coming from, and where staff is saying there are certain things that are not consistent. But I'm reading here under the LDRs, as the resulting rezoning district raises concerns regarding potential land uses incompatible with adjacent properties, where I would argue the other way around. Whether it's a school or Johns Island Golf Course or whatever, but again, we have rules we've got to deal with that are black and white as opposed to what might make more sense in the real world too. So I'm kind of betwixt and between.
Not to mention the non-conforming residential structure that's adjacent.
Well, yeah, that's not going to be there forever. But I'm thinking out loud, sorry.
Go ahead, Mark.
I have a comment and then perhaps a question. I'm your representative, the board's representative, the commission's representative on the Affordable Housing Committee. And as such, I have to applaud the applicant for their effort toward affordable housing. Affordable housing kind of hard to define, and hopefully, this will be carried through so that some people at least can afford this. But the question is, I assume that staff and the applicant have worked together to find a zoning classification if it's not OCR. I'm not good enough to know why you wouldn't go straight to a multifamily residential zoning, but I hope you have worked together to exhaust all possibilities.
So I can answer on that because I actually did have in our long-range section, we require all applications prior to going before any board to actually have a pre-application meeting. So what staff indicated to the applicant at the time, which was the Concordia Group, was the application that was given in front of us, which was a pre-application for a rezoning to be able to get to a product of multifamily. The only way that staff could support said zoning to multifamily to get them to their end use would be to utilize the Live Local Act, which allows for multifamily in a commercial or industrial district and has built-in criteria for affordable housing specifically, which requires 40% of the units to be affordable. That was discussed with them, and we went from there. It was noted that staff could not support any request to OCR for the reasons listed in the staff report, as well as items A through K and the comprehensive plan policies.
So I just want to interject here and kind of drive us back away from this again, because we aren't supposed to be discussing what the potential use, you know, whether it's a house, it's a drive-through, it's whatever. Have to focus on whether or not they meet the criteria for the rezoning based on competent, substantial evidence, and also if we could just kind of get away from what our ideas of a specific use is, and it needs to be based on whatever the competent, substantial evidence demonstrates, and not only that, but what the most exhaustive use is. What is it, commercial here?
So the most intense use would be commercial,
There you go.
which is the existing zoning category.
Could we do the equivalent of jury nullification here?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair and Madam Prado, if I may just add a little bit to Mr. Winter's comment. Another part of, you suggested a rezoning to just a straight residential zoning. That would clearly also require a future land use map comprehensive plan amendment. And I think in fairness to the applicant, it's clear we're not asking for something outside of the CI future land use zoning. This is a different, smaller, neck-down version within that. Otherwise, you truly would have an island of a future land use residential use in the middle of all of this. To suggest that this is not a commercial use is just a blatant misrepresentation. It's called OCR. It is a zoning category within the commercial industrial future land use designation. That is irrefutable.
I wasn't proposing that the residential, the multifamily residential was possible, but it just because I don't understand all the ins and outs of that.
I just wanted to answer your question.
I
Thank you.
understand, thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, if I may. I do want to draw attention to a lot of conversation was brought on behalf of the actual comprehensive policy, but there is land development regulations that go into this too. Every application is evaluated on items A through K. And I want to bring to attention item I, whether or not the proposed amendment would result in an orderly or logical development pattern, specifically identifying any negative effects on such pattern. So when we look at the existing zoning district, which is a general commercial, which only allows for commercial uses. When you look at the office commercial residential, by the actual zoning regulations, that would introduce residential into that commercial location. So yes, the highest and best use, or the highest and most intense use in the commercial district, if rezoned, is commercial. However, you have to look at the zoning district as a whole as of all other uses that could be brought into that potential commercial node and other zoning districts, which does allow for residential. So in Ms. Prada's comment of what the county commission is allowed to deny is even if it's allowable within the land uses, which is the commercial industrial land use, there still can be a denial for that because the actual zoning district is not compatible within that commercial industrial land use. I do want to bring that to motion, or mention, excuse me.
I would think, Chris, if you put your affordable housing hat on, this would be a dream.
So I do have.
I would like to comment on that as well. So if this board chooses to go with an approval of office commercial residential, there is no guarantee from the applicant that this is affordable. The state statutes are very specific on what affordable means. And not to even bring up Live Local again, but it's built into that criteria of those definitions into that tool, site plan development tool. I don't know if the applicant would be willing to enter into a self-imposed restriction of meeting affordable, but as in any rezoning, they can choose any of the allowable zoning uses in that criteria. So that can be commercial, office, and residential.
Correct, but I guess we're not allowed to place a condition on,
No. And I think, I think, I want to gear you back away from that again, Mr. Mucher. Once again, we're not going to focus on whether there's going to be affordable housing here or not. Just, you know, they can say they will, and tomorrow they could sell it to someone else, or they could do it. I mean, we can't hold them to that. It's, you have to consider whether or not they meet the criteria that are here. We cannot consider the proposed uses for it. So please scratch the affordable housing, I think, from the consideration, because we have to consider, based on the facts and evidence, either whether it fits into this criteria and it meets the definition and the requirements for the rezoning, or it does not.
Yes, I do have a question. I understand everything that's been discussed about affordable housing. But Susan, if this were to make it to the commission on the appeal process, what leeway do they have in terms of affordable housing or any other uses?
The commission is bound basically by their own same rules they have for approval and for denial. So at that point in time, I mean, they can make their own determination. It's just basically another fact-finding set, another fact-finding board that's going to make the decision whether or not they approve or deny based on the rules and items that we have set forth. It's just kind of, I can explain it better. It's almost like another layer to the onion, if I may say that. So their decision can also be denied to the circuit court should whoever not agree with the decision. But that's kind of where that goes, and that's how that works. If that answers your question, I hope. No.
Does it? I'm trying to think of it. It doesn't get me where I want to be.
I'm sorry. Please, you can ask another one.
I might ask one. What do you think our exposure is with moving this to OCR? I understand that OCR is meant as a transition, buffer zone between commercial and residential. You can certainly argue that Johns Island is RM8 residential, and well, I guess just what do you think the exposure is and the downside of deviating from what can be seen as a comprehensive plan?
So I don't know that I can give you an opinion as far as exposure. I think that would fall outside of my duties to this board, which would be to give relatively legal advice on what you can and cannot do and what you should and shouldn't consider, basically, which is just the evidence. So I'm sorry, I cannot answer that question for you. That's something I think you'll have to consider on your own, but I don't think that's something that you can necessarily take into consideration when you're doing this. It would just need to be the evidence that's presented before you.
Just so I understand the process and not assume anything, they didn't go Live Local because of the delay of changing the land development regulations, in essence. What is the time period on that normally?
To use the Live Local bill? So there's no delay in using the Live Local bill. It's done administratively, and it doesn't go before the Planning and Zoning Board or the County Commission.
No LDR changes?
Nope.
Nothing.
The thing that I can say that in talking with most developers is they don't like that they are required to set aside affordable units, and you have those affordable units meet the state's criteria.
I have to object to continuing to talk about Live Local. It's not relevant to the issue. You've already advised this board multiple times.
I would agree. I think we need to get away from the Live Local, get away from any affordable housing talk that was brought up by the applicant. And so we need to make sure that we strike that and just go based off of the criteria.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I wasn't going that far along, I was just more concerned with timing, to be fair, but, and I also serve on the Affordable Housing Committee, too, so, which is not relevant at this point.
And you know, if we're being clear about it, Live Local would only be for residential development. The OCR, which is the pending zoning application, is for office, commercial, residential. I know that keeps getting lost in this, but what that is the tail wagging the dog. We would still have to come in for site plan approval for whatever would go there, and it could still be one of the permitted uses in the CG. It still could be. What this allows is a less intense use, as you've already heard, still within the CI overlay, and across the street, you already, back to the question about whether there's exposure, I know council could not answer that, but you already have OCR across the street that clearly did not cause a problem with the comprehensive plan. Otherwise, staff certainly would have not recommended approval of that, and it wouldn't have made it through this board and all the way up to the county commission. It's inconceivable to suggest that this is problematic when less than 300 feet across the street is exactly the same thing. What is the evidence supporting that? Thank you.
Mr. Chair. So to speak on the actual zoning that's across the street, it is OCR, and in that commercial node is limited commercial for a true transition of OCR to the residential neighborhood and then further back to limited commercial. So that is why that was able to be supported and rezoned, because it met those criteria and was truly a transition and met items A through K of the actual requirements of the land development regulations.
Anything else?
I'd just like to make a comment, Mr. Chairman. And I agree. You know, we have spent a lot of time talking about uses when this meeting is about rezoning. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like under the current zoning, CG, the most intense use is greater than OCR. OCR appears to be more restrictive. So I just am not convinced that that's not in the public's best interest. Just a comment.
I agree.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything else?
I've heard some comments that the multifamily residential is allowed in CG. Is that, am I wrong?
So multifamily residential is only allowed in CG when it is accessory to a commercial use. It is not allowed in the general commercial district if it is not accessory to a commercial use. In the OCR district, residential is allowed in that.
As a standalone.
Correct, with no commercial component.
So I want to bring the board's attention back again to, once again, not uses and whether or not it meets the criteria. The criteria is laid out in section 902.12 of our county code, subsection 3, standards of review, letters A through, K. Those are the criteria. And it's this board's determination, job is to determine whether or not there's competent substantial evidence that this request for rezoning meets those criteria.
Calvin, I know you got a football game to look at. Can I see that criteria again? Sure.
Hey, that's what we're here for.
So the first one doesn't meet the criteria because existing uses, it's not adjacent to existing uses. And would serve as a buffer between the residential and commercial. But if it's,
It's not.
if it's OCR, B, I'm sorry. If it's OCR, and potentially it would possibly be a buffer on.
So this is where the comprehensive plan actually ties into the analysis part of the chapter of 902.13 subsection, 902.12 subsection 3. And one of those review criteria is it consistent with all elements of the comprehensive plan? So we have to take in that policy, and as we've stated, and I don't think I need to say it again, it does not meet that specific policy of 1.43, which is, and I just want to say that it does say consistent with all elements of the comprehensive plan. And then I can flip to the next one if you just want to see that one. That's subsection F. And then there is, on the next slide.
I'm sorry, can you go back to that?
Sure. One more.
This one?
Yes. So it's subject to change conditions that warrant an amendment, which may or may not be accurate. Okay?
And then on the next page. And then I result in orderly and logical.
Which, I mean, I beg to differ. I mean, it would provide a logical and orderly development pattern. Okay? J, not in harmony with.
Can you talk into the mic?
I'm so sorry. Yeah. And J is it's not in harmony with the purpose and intent to complement and enhance existing development. Okay? Is that it?
And then,
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, yeah, okay. All right.
Not aware of a lot of existing development that's around that area right now. It seems that that land is vacant and has not been able to been put to, use for, I think, 7 years, we heard. They've been trying to develop that. So I think we are looking at a square peg, round hole situation.
We ready to close the public hearing? Anything else? On the right? Left, anything else? Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And I think we're pretty much talked out, so I think we're in a position to call for a motion.
I would move to approve staff's recommendation.
Is there a second?
You gotta give specific reasons.
Yes, we would need to have you would have to state what facts and evidence you're determining the denial on. You're approving staff's recommendation, so in staff's recommendation, they say they want to deny based on whatever reasons they had in there. Are you differing? Are you adopting all those reasons? We have to be a little bit more clear as to why you're denying.
So my motion would say that we're approving staff's recommendation for denial based on the fact that the project is incompatible, which was found in the analysis.
Okay, so, sorry. Incompatible, are you, so they went through subsection B, incompatible with the, with the, 1.43, or are you going with,
I was going with everything that they listed.
okay. Okay. So for, I'm sorry, can you please put that back up? I just want to make sure we have a clear motion for the record. The stuff that you were denying it for, it was for 1.43.
In the conclusion section of the backup material.
Thank you, right there. So you're saying that you're wanting to deny based on the fact that it was not consistent with all the elements of the comprehensive plan, basically 1.43. Move to the next one.
Yes.
I know you guys closed the public hearing, but there's something not right on there. So it says there's office not adjacent. Travis Whitfield's office is across the street. So they didn't do their work and find out there's office across the street. So make that record.
Okay. So, to the next piece, please. Basically on part F that said, subject to change conditions that exist and warrant an amendment, the subject properties are situated in the middle of an existing commercial node that remains largely undeveloped. So this is your reason for that?
Yes.
Thank you. Next. I, result in the orderly and logical development pattern specifically identifying the negative effects on such pattern, that it does not meet this and it does not result in an orderly development pattern.
Yes.
In conflict with public interest and is in harmony with the purpose and interests of the land development regulations, that it does not meet that criteria, that the request is not in harmony with the purpose and intent of the land development regulations, as the OCR district is designed to complement and enhance existing development.
Yes, and I'd like to make 2 comments along with this motion. I understand the inability to talk about the needs or the land use, and I certainly won't do that. But I do appreciate the effort that has gone into this application and those discussions, and I would really like to see that concept developed further. That's just my own personal opinion. Obviously from all the discussion, this is really it's very strange that we can't get to some solution, and I realize that there are some parcels and property out there that have floated around for a long time, but I would like to see this resolved in a positive way for all of us, and I very much appreciate the efforts that's gone into it so far. But back to my motion, you stated it well, Susan.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm covering what you're wanting in your motion. Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second?
I feel compelled to recognize that staff has put a lot of effort into this, and they are doing what they need to do, and
We need a second for discussion.
So we can
Yeah,
discuss?
we need a second.
Sorry.
sorry, guys, everybody else has been talking. That's it, I'm done.
Is there a second?
Doesn't sound like it.
Okay, so then the motion fails for lack of a second. Is there another motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the rezoning request.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the zoning request. We have a second. All in favor?
Wait, before, can we have discussion?
Sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you need to state your basis for approval and what competent and substantial evidence you have for approving the rezoning. Thank you. No, they don't need to state all that. I'm getting a very big head shake no from.
May I approach?
Sure.
Mr. Chair, as you did say earlier, Ms. Prado, if an application comes in and it is recommended for denial, staff initially has the burden. Once that burden shifts over to the applicant, if the applicant meets that and a recommendation for approval, you do not, and I've never seen it. So this is my experience as a local government lawyer. I've never seen an approval with recommendations, evidence, suggestions. It's just simply an approval. The point of a denial having enunciated reasons is so that on appeal, somebody who's not here tonight could see the reasons why. But an approval is an approval. So I respectfully disagree that you would need to enunciate any reasons for an approval. The motion with an appropriate second is on the floor. I think it's now either time for discussion or a vote as a point of order for Robert's Rules of Order. Thank you.
But you work for them and she works for us.
I totally understand it.
So I would just like to note that under the Snyder case, it does say that that's a Supreme Court case of Florida. It says that the landowner seeking the rezoning has the burden of proving the proposal is consistent. So the burden starts with the landowner. It then goes to the staff to rebut that and make sure that it's, and to say that it's not at this point in time. You all are saying that the applicant has proved their case. So we can open this, or at least from the first and the second. You can open it up for discussion and discuss what you shall.
I don't feel the need to elaborate on my motion, but I will say that I believe it's compatible with surrounding area developments and, in my opinion, suitable for transition zoning.
Any other discussion?
If you,
A second, do I need to do anything?
no, you're fine. If you seconded and you don't want to add any more, that's fine.
Last chance. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes, 5-1.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know that was long. Thank you.
Commissioner matters. Any commissioner matters? Planning matters? No. Attorney matters? Adjourned.